Gaming is more accessible than ever nowadays. Whether it's an indie title or a AAA game, there is something out there for everyone. Boss fights have been a staple in games since their early years. Since forever, games have always used boss fights as a way to test the mettle of their players, putting all of their skills to the test at different points of their journey to see if they have what it takes to overcome a new unfamiliar obstacle. Even games that don't have linear progression and lack proper boss fights still give their players challenges, milestones, and reasons to keep playing and exploring. But there are different kinds of boss fights, one of them being final bosses. Bowser, Dr. Robotnik, Dr. Wily, Ridley, just to name a few classics. These are bosses meant to be the seal on your journey, the final step in your definitive experience as the player, a test of your mettle and skill. A battle of epic proportions putting all you know to the test. But today we return to the mind of Hidetaka Miyazaki, celebrating the 10th birthday of one of my favorite games of all time, Dark Souls 3, and analyzing what I believe to be the best final boss ever. For those of you who might be a tad unfamiliar with the original trilogy and its concepts, I'll give a quick consensus. The game takes place in the dark medieval world of Lordran, at the beginning of the world where dragons roamed and ruled. After being shrouded in darkness indefinitely, out of nowhere, light appeared in the form of flame. First Flame presented the power of souls to be used as energy and was kindled by 4 people: Gravelord Nito, the Witch of Izalith, Gwyn, Lord of Sunlight, and the Furtive Pygmy. These people would go on to lead the world with their own separate agendas, alliances, and aspirations. The Furtive Pygmy is the ancestor of humanity, and as humans would advance and evolve as a species, Gwyn, one of the more prominent lords who ruled over kingdoms, dragons, and had armies to his name, he then placed a curse on all of humanity called the Dark Sign, a curse that would cause humanity to be essentially forever trapped in a loop, where they would be constantly reborn after death, slowly losing their sanity and humanity and become hollow, forever cursing them to a lowly life of brain-dead, unpurposed roaming. Humans are said to go hollow when they give up, or lose their will to exist, or feel a lack of purpose. So when your player character awakes to a world already on its way out, we are informed of a prophecy, and since there is really nothing better to do, the player embarks on a journey to fulfill the prophecy and kindle the first flame. Only the first and third games stick to this concept of the first flame, and the world being kept in a forever loop due to the first flame and the act of prophecy, with the second game actually choosing to delve into the idea of the undead curse in a really nice and creative way. In the first game, the player can choose to rekindle the flame and reset the world, or let the flame fade and usher in a world of darkness, once again like how it was at the beginning. All 3 games have different endings depending on this choice, but it's heavily implied and universally accepted that the ending of the first game is in fact to rekindle the first flame and let the cycle begin anew. Now, this concept is very interesting, as it literally gives lore to the idea of respawning in a video game, which is something that's existed forever, and this concept is the foundation of the series and what makes it so good. But Dark Souls 3 takes this concept and builds upon it in an insane way. If you recall how this video started with my talk of final bosses and boss fights as a whole, it's no surprise that Dark Souls is definitely infamous for its bosses' difficulty and overall combat, spawning a genre of games called Souls-likes throughout the years. In Dark Souls and games historically, boss fights usually have cutscenes to get the player prepped and maybe give some exposition for the epic battle about to take place. However, in Dark Souls 1, while yes, there would be cutscenes for most of the game's bosses, the final boss of the game is Gwyn, Lord of Cinder, and this fight is very bland, very cut and dry, and overall underwhelming on purpose. It is meant to communicate that Gwyn, once one of the great lords, the one who cursed your species into accursed living, is now a husk of his former self, after using his soul to keep fueling the flame for years, and is overall a shadow of who he used to be, as you the player are about to fulfill the prophecy that he worked so hard and caused the suffering of millions to avoid. Though, in Dark Souls 3, the final boss of the game is the Soul of Cinder, a being unnamed throughout the game's entirety, a name never once uttered by anyone prior, a concept never brought into the equation in the game's runtime in any of the 3 titles. So why oh why am I boasting that this fight, with someone otherwise completely random and easily mistaken as a shoehorned fight for a half-assed finale, is the greatest of its kind as a final boss meant as a conclusion to a beloved trilogy? Well, Dark Souls 3 as a game was a heavily anticipated game after the mixed reception of Dark Souls 2, advertised as a turning point for the series and a thrilling conclusion to the beloved title. The game once again revisited the concept of the first flame and the idea of the loop forever cursed onto humanity by Gwyn and its consequences later on in the world. The game opens similarly to its prior entries, with its talk about an era of darkness overcome by an influx of light and flame. But Dark Souls 3 references it in past tense directly. In venturing north, the pilgrims discovered the truth of the old words: the fire fades and the lords go without thrones. The opening alone, unlike its prior titles, shows a world already in ruins. A world of lost hope and will in the lords that pave it, as we once again hear tell of a prophecy of an undead to rise above the rest and rekindle the flame. The intro is almost a total opposite of the one used in the first entry. Where the intro of Dark Souls 1 talked of the prophecy as a legend that must be fulfilled, and how the world has transformed because of how the first flame empowered the world around it and its inhabitants, granting power, prosperity, and luxury to the lords it embedded in with the power of soul energy. In the intro of Dark Souls 3, we hear talks of prophecy in a diminishing way. As the cinematic pans over a desolate and distorted ashen wasteland, we see Lordran, now a kingdom called Lothric, as the lords rise again to prepare to do it all over again. Both communicate the message that the player must save the world, though both cinematics and games overall convey that message very differently. In Dark Souls 1, the undead must fulfill the prophecy to save a doomed world, but in Dark Souls 3, the undead is forced to venture on the same journey again, seeing how this song and dance has otherwise transformed the world around them as the first flame continues to burn. Dark Souls 3, as I've mentioned before, makes the player themselves feel like the villain in the story they are watching unfold. In the first game, the undead rekindles the flame and brings upon a new age as the world resets. The game itself would tell its story of then and now, explaining the history of the first flame and how those granted its light used its blessings to bring hope or despair to their followers and power to their alliances. But in Dark Souls 3, the game spends a lot of time showing us what was. The game at every corner shows you a world plagued by suffering and vengeance due to the rhythm we the player have continued to enable. Dark Souls 3 is a personification of the choices the player has made and how it has continued to affect this world, how the rhythm of the prophecy has continued to flow throughout the waves of time for better or for worse. Even in Inner Londo, an iconic Golden Land area remembered for its desolate beauty in Dark Souls 1 is now just desolate. There are lore reasons for this that aren't directly comparable to consequences of the prophecy, and are moreover just consequences of violence between two beings that destroyed the illusion of warmth in Inner Londo present in Dark Souls 1, but I still digress that the desolate hollow emptiness of Inner Londo in Dark Souls 3 further communicates the decay brought upon the world. Where Dark Souls 1 tells a story of then and now, Dark Souls 3 just tells a story of now, a story of what's left and a story of what remains. In Dark Souls 3, the lords have all rekindled the flame, and due to the continued downward spiral in the world around them, they all grow tired of their titles, lacking the will to do their jobs, and at the end of it all, nobody just really wants to rekindle the flame anymore. All that exists are memories and tales of great leaders in a world stuck in the continued state of decay. Yorm, one of the lords, linked the flame because he believed it would save the world and his people, when he did the opposite and lives in constant anger because of this fate he brought into fruition due to the pressures of prophesied duty. It is actually implied that the game takes place directly after Yorm's kindling, given that in the intro he himself awakes and you can see him flare up in rage. The Abyss Watchers grew bored, and now spend their days as former lords taking advantage of their human curse in an eternal duel between the three of them that never ends due to the undead curse of constant rebirth. It's likely this is their attempt at not going hollow, existing for pure bloodshed and violence. Something else worth noting is that in each of their respective boss fights, none of the lords are typically looking to kill you exactly. They're all just kind of idle and present, treating you as just something worth entertaining. Yorm is the only one who doesn't even move for you, only when Siegmeyer, a recurring NPC character, comes to fulfill a promise to an old friend. That friend being Yorm, who told Siegmeyer to put him out of his misery should he fail as a lord during the rekindling and go mad. Aldrich is not interested in rekindling the flame and only exists to satiate his hunger from devouring humans and gods alike. His physical form shares the body of Gwyndolin, a young prince of Gwyn who was the reason for Inner Londo's golden glow. With his body now being used as Aldrich's puppet, the once shimmering golden hue of Inner Londo, now a hollow empty shadow no longer shrouded in illusion. And then there's Lothric himself, who just flat out believes that the ritual itself is futile due to the sacrifice it entails. The only lord in this game who isn't a boss is Ludlith, and serves as the NPC meant to remind you of why you're here, to rekindle the flame. He is morally grey and only exists to remind the player of the goal as another lord who has given up, surrendering his soul to your cause whatever it may be, as it is to be remembered that every Dark Souls game up until now has given the player a choice, to continue the flame or to let it fade. And these insights are only from the lords themselves. In this game there are countless displays of how the world has spiraled as a consequence of the rekindling that you started. This is what I mean when I say that Dark Souls 3 makes the player feel like the villain in their own story, a story they themselves wrote no less. Another example is that demons, a very strong and prominent race in Dark Souls 1, are now functionally extinct. Even dragons, a race that has existed long before the first flame, are now a lesser version of themselves, as everything is. Taking into account all of this, it is meant to convey that the best course of action in this game is one of mercy, to let the first flame die and grant the world peace in the quiet of a world without the light that tortures them, to put an end to the loop and the idea of the prophecy. But regardless of what path you choose to take, there is one thing that stands before you at the end of it all. The final obstacle in your way, the Soul of Cinder. Now we are reaching the point in the video where I directly go into what makes this fight truly one of, if not arguably, the best final boss sequences ever. Soul of Cinder, as mentioned before, is an entity of unknown origin. It was never mentioned beforehand, never even hinted at, nor was it built up at any point. Soul of Cinder just was brought into existence. Similar to Gwyn, the final boss of this journey has no cutscene, just throws you into the fight. But Gwyn as a boss was a fight the player at least had time to mentally prepare for, as his name was brought up countless times in Dark Souls 1 through exposition and exploration to the game's idea of natural progression. Soul of Cinder wasn't. So who the hell is the Soul of Cinder, and why the hell are they the last line of defense in your journey? But you don't have time to think about that. You have a fight ahead of you. Now this fight is hard. An expectation for Dark Souls games, after all, a series/genre who built a big chunk of its reputation due to its otherwise unforgiving difficulty. But the big reason why this fight is so difficult is because of its unpredictable nature, as the Soul of Cinder is one of the only, maybe the only one in Souls history at this point who can freely and flawlessly switch between different fighting styles on a whim. And that's just in the first phase. The second phase of this fight starts with a large explosion, and now the Soul of Cinder wields an even bigger claymore and has a ridiculous range on all attacks. One mistake and you are dead. The Soul of Cinder is a fight that leaves very little room for pattern recognition, as it's always changing. Whether it's using the claymore, the pyromancy short sword, the magic, or the polearm, the boss is always throwing everything at you. As a final boss, it is already delivered on a pure visual and gameplay front. The final fight of this game is meant to test your mettle in an epic battle filled with visual spectacle. But as the fight continues, you realize what the Soul of Cinder is. You realize who you're up against. The Soul of Cinder is you. A warrior that exists as a manifestation of the first flame, and a warrior made up of all of those who have kindled the flame before you. In order to extinguish the flame, you must confront it. In order for a conclusion, there must be a beginning. Even at the end, Dark Souls 3 is a battle of then versus now. Two warriors that through it all have never stopped adapting and growing through the passage of time. The Soul of Cinder is a celebration of the player's journey. Its combat movesets, referencing popular builds used in its games, between the strength-focused builds like the Claymore and Polearm popular in Dark Souls 1, to the dex-focused Pyromancy short sword builds and intelligence magic-focused builds popular in Dark Souls 2. The Soul of Cinder is you. In a world you have unknowingly sentenced to despair, you must fight yourself. The will of the flame and the foundation of the prophecy itself as you seek to bring an end to it all. At the end of the world, there are no gods, no divine entities, no giant eldritch beasts. At the end of it all, it's just you. A memory of the warrior you've evolved into after countless battles, journeys, and deaths. The music as well really makes this fight. One of the greatest things about Soul of Cinder is its theme. A theme that calls back to what makes this series so great. Soul of Cinder acts as what I really believe to be the perfect conclusion to such an iconic beloved series that people continue to celebrate and build upon. It uses leitmotifs that call back to the more memorable parts of Dark Souls, such as taking bites out of the Firelink Shrine theme, and the more known and recognized one in this song is the iconic 3 piano notes from the very first fight with Gwyn, the plin plin plon as it's called. And I also really loved how the music alone succeeds at communicating how intense and important a fight like this is. Compared to the fight with Gwyn, the soft melancholic theme meant to communicate a man who's lost it all, to the final battle at the end of it all, using memories of a battle your character has never fought to communicate to the player directly. The soft piano isn't even hidden beneath the epic crescendos and instrumental either. The song is able to call back to a simpler, softer time, all while still being an intense bout between you and the Soul of Cinder. Those 3 notes alone make or break what makes the theme so insane. It communicates that, yes, you have been here before. You have fought this battle before, just like everyone else has. It's all been done before, but no longer. This trilogy holds generally such a large and important space in my heart, and as a series that has taught me patience, perseverance, and community, and the beauty in piecing together a story on your own. It's a trilogy that rewards those who ask questions, those who explore, and those who try to understand, but is also still an enjoyable experience to those who progress the game in a more linear way of playing, as linear as you can make Dark Souls at least. That reason alone is partially why I'm so hesitant at the idea of an Elden Ring movie as teased by George R. R. Martin. Souls games aren't exactly remembered for the sense of having a concrete beginning, middle, or end, or just linear progression as a whole. Oh, what I wouldn't give for a Bloodborne series with Tim Burton and Peter Jackson behind the wheels. Or just a new Bloodborne anything at this point. I'm getting ahead of myself. The point of this video is, yes, to glaze From Software, Dark Souls, and suck Hidetaka Miyazaki off myself, but it is also a video meant to celebrate one of my favorite games of all time, and how its conclusion alone exists as one of, if not the best in its medium, 10 years later. This game and I both shared really important birthdays this month, and I'm forever grateful for the impact this series has had on me. It is such an incredible world still filled with surprises and intriguing, tragic, and dark story of power, family, life, and death. Thank you all for watching, as per usual. I love you all and hope everyone has a nice rest of your day. And always remember to praise the sun.